Hey y'all, welcome back to Living Transparent. This is gonna be the first episode of our new series called Your Comeback, and we thought this would be like a good transition from our last series, which was bringing to share our story to your comeback. Because once you recognize the purpose and story that God has in your life is now established on the blessings and miracles of God, and from there you can start your comeback.
Yeah, and throughout the Bible, multiple comebacks are seen, Since the start, we have failed and we have fallen short, but the story of humanity didn't stop once Eve ate the apple in the Garden of Eden. Like the Bible doesn't end in Genesis, it keeps on going. The story, our story keeps on going because God's love is much greater. And in that same sense, your life doesn't stop once you fail. No, it keeps on going, and God's love has a capacity to initiate our comeback. Because of God, we have a story, and because of our story, there is a comeback within our story.
And when I was studying this, when I was writing, my question that kept coming to my mind was like, can we experience a comeback even after our defeat? And the short answer is yes. God can give us a comeback because we serve a God that that constantly restores and redeems. And He sets our life according to His plan, and God plans goes according to His purpose. And like we said, I think it was last episode, that God's plans are perfect, and sometimes He's gonna give us what we need instead of what we want. So it kind of like correlates.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of, I think, the opposite. He gives.
Oh.
Yeah. Instead of giving us what we want, he gives us what we need. There you go.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah, but no, and it also kind of goes with what we've been saying. We saw it in the other episodes, and what we said is like sometimes like in the waiting process, that's when your comeback starts. And we just need to arise from the ashes of our previous defeats. So. In that same aspect, in that same sense, God commands what is dead in our life to be alive again. And if your motivation, love, and hope are dead, God will restore it with His power, and He will make those dead things in your life alive again. And I often pray this prayer, and I think I heard it in a sermon, and I think it's a song. I think it's like an elevation song, but I couldn't recall the name of the song. But I pray these words, and it's, God, awaken these dry bones. Because sometimes I feel like I need to hear these words, like, girl, get up, like, girl, get to it, girl, get moving, because I don't know if it happens to you guys, but sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this like anymore. Like, again, a school, really, oh my gosh, again and again. And sometimes I feel like so, like, I guess, drowned in like sorrow and drowned in defeat. But I think like those words refresh my life. So I find myself praying that prayer, like, God, awaken these dry bones. And in that same sense, like, God, fill me with your spirit and fill me with your presence, and Jesus spoke somewhat similar words. I made the modification of like, girl, get up, that's my version of like, whenever I'm going through something, I'm like, okay, girl, you gotta get it together, but there's this story that is found in Luke 7:14, and basically this story is that a widow's only son had died, and Jesus saw this woman crying, and He told her to not cry. This woman, obviously she had lost her husband since she was a widow. Now she was experiencing the loss of her son, so she was in pain, she was in sorrow, and Jesus came upon her direction, and He was like, don't cry, and He spoke over this young man, and He said, this is what He said. Jesus said, young man, I say to you, get up. Jesus was speaking over a dead person. He was speaking over this dead man's life. And once He like spoke those words of get up, that person came to life again. And like I guess like when I was reading this story, I put myself, okay, like if I were to be in that crowd and I would see like Jesus like putting His hand over a dead person and that dead person coming back to life, I'd be like, whoa, like, what is that? Like how like the power of God is so magnificent and so great that it has the capacity to bring literally a person back from the dead to life again, and I think that's fascinating. And I think it's incredible to know that the same power that lifted Jesus up from the dead is within us. Like that's what I think all the time. And every time that I think about that, I'm like, oh, that's so great that like the same power that lifted Jesus is in me, and it's in us, and it has the capacity to like get us through anything and to get us moving forward into our comeback. And we can all, there's a similar story, and it's the story of Lazarus. And he also had a comeback story similar to this young man. His sister Martha went to look for Jesus, and she told Jesus that her brother was dead. She went to Jesus. She was in sorrow. And I was rereading the story right now, actually, and I didn't know that Lazarus had already been dead for 4 days. I didn't remember that part. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. Like Martha was still in agony, and she was still crying over her brother because it was a recent death. And Jesus then comes, and Jesus responded to Martha, your brother will rise again. And like I just mentioned, like her brother had been dead for 4 days. And I can imagine Martha like, oh, like my brother's already dead though, like how is he gonna rise again? I feel like that's something that would have come up to my mind if I was Martha, because that is like my humanly thoughts.
I would have been like, you're God, you're you're a little late.
Yeah, you're a little, and that's what it's actually mentioned in the story. Like Martha and Mary, the sisters of Lazarus, are like, Jesus, if you would have been here, this would have never happened.
And I feel like that's a prayer or something that I constantly do, that I'd be like, God, if you would have done this, like, or if you would have not let this happen, like I wouldn't be here. Yeah. And I would start blaming God. And I feel like that's what Martha was.
Yeah, she was like, oh, Jesus, if you would have been here, my brother wouldn't have been dead. I wouldn't have been going through this pain. But then in John, this story is found in John, by the way, John chapter 11. And in John 11:25, there is this powerful verse. And Jesus told Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. And then Jesus like tells Martha and Mary, okay, like take me to the tomb of your brother where Lazarus is. And Jesus goes by the tomb and he says, Lazarus, come out. And then Lazarus got up. Like once again, this is another story that we see in the Bible, that Jesus rose someone from the dead. And that is like a comeback itself, like the power of Jesus restoring and being able to resurrect someone.
Yeah, and I feel like we might not necessarily have to have this story, like this young man that came back to life. But sometimes we might feel so discouraged in a way, or like so defeated in our life. But sometimes it's up to us. That's what I was trying to say. It's our choice. We have a choice and a decision to arise from the ashes of our previous defeat. And it's our choice if we want to move forward or just stay where we're at right now. And I feel like right now we all need a comeback. And sometimes we can get too comfortable in our situation, where we're just so indulged in our sin or in our situation that it might be just easier to just stay where you're at. I've been there. I've been like where I'm too tired to even get out of bed, or I'm too tired to just do anything, and I'd rather just stay in bed. I'd rather just stay sad, or I'd just rather stay depressed or just mad.
Yeah, and I feel like that happens because you don't know anything else. That's like been engraved in your head, like, oh no, I've been told I'm a disappointment. Oh no, I've been told I will never succeed. Oh no, I've been told that, like, that's not my life. But like, those are all misconceptions, and those are all lies of the enemy that will try to like keep you to be at the place that you're at, instead of like trying to look for the comeback that God has set in our lives.
Yeah, and instead of trying to look for it, we just accept our defeat. And I feel like we sometimes assume a role with no dignity and no value. And sometimes, well, when it came to me, when I was like, oh, like I can't, like I don't want to do this anymore. Like I'd rather stay mad, or I'd rather stay sad, or whatever. I felt like God couldn't do anything through me because I was at such a bad situation from my point of view. But I was totally wrong, because there's nothing impossible for God, and we will arise from the ashes of our defeat. And we need to renew our faith in the things that God has revealed for us.
Yeah, and like, you know how you were saying that you feel like you weren't necessarily like moving forward, and it's kind of like what we mentioned in your episode, and it was like that you were blocking yourself from your comeback. Like, I think us as like obviously people, we block and limit what God can do through us constantly, because we're like, no, and we're like, no. And God's like, oh, no, that's not me. No, sorry, you know. And I've that's happened in my life, you know. I've been like God can be like, okay, do this. No, that's not me. Oh,
and I feel like
okay, I have this for you.
And most of the times, I feel like I blocked myself from fear of the unknown. I guess.
Because you're so, like we said, like you're so used to being in that situation, or you're so used to like being. You feel safe, you know, like it's like
we're in our comfort zone and we don't want to get out of it.
Yeah, and it's like your routine, like no. I do this every day, and I do this every day, and then God's like, do this. No, that's not, I don't know how to do that, like, that's not me, you know, and, no, you just gotta, like, you gotta open up yourself to the comeback that God has for you, you know, you gotta let God work in you in order for your comeback to be seen and to prevail. So, we have to let go of our past and be prepared for what God has for us. You know, I think reflecting and holding on to your past can be very dangerous. You know, because you can be like, oh, well, like, you know, I messed up a lot. I did this. And that can hold you back, because the enemy can use your past to keep you in the same place instead of moving forward. You know, and we can't keep holding on to things that are holding us back from God's promises. We have to recognize who God is and the power that his name holds. I think we've been emphasizing on the power that the name of Jesus holds. You know, like we've mentioned it through our stories. Like we've seen how God has restored us and redeemed us, and now we just told you guys about the story of Lazarus and the story of this young man, and we're still seeing the same power that we will continually see from Jesus's power. You know, and we need to go from our setbacks to our comebacks. You know, and I think Melanie actually, she was like, oh, this reminded me of Moses. And I was like, oh, you're so right. Because Moses serves an example, and the people of Israel serve as an example of what a setback looked like. Because the people of Israel kept prolonging the promised land. They kept complaining and they kept doubting. And so a journey that we kept reading, and in the Bible it didn't specify how many days it would have initially been, but after like I guess gathering information and like inferring in a way, a journey that was supposed to take the Israelites 11 days turned into a journey of 40 years. No, like when we were like looking into that, we're like, no, like, you know, like I guess a little backstory for those that don't know really much about Moses. God had previously allowed the people of Israel to escape from the Egyptians, and he set them free. But like we've been saying, like, oh, maybe we're so used to like being stuck in the situations that we're at that we don't want to move forward. That was the case for the people of Israel. You know, they were like, oh no, but we used to be slaves. You know, we had food back then. We were in a good place back then. And now that we're walking in the promised land, we have no food. We don't have clothes. And now we're like, you know, like the people of Israel wanted to go back to that old habit and that old place, that they prolonged that instead of like seeing their comeback right away, they kept seeing setbacks because they weren't letting God work in their lives, you know. And our story and our destiny change when we recognize that our comeback starts with Jesus. You know, our comeback will allow us to have a different perspective on who we are because of Jesus. And our comeback, our ultimate and everyone's comeback is because Jesus Christ is alive and because he rose from the dead. You know, that is it. Like, that is how our comeback starts, is because of Jesus.
And as humans, as people, as Christians, we might experience life interruptions, or you could say we suffer from disappointments. But Jesus, in the Bible, Jesus tells us that we are to expect tribulations. But even through our tribulations, even in our tribulations, we have to live like Paul did. We have to live through faith, live in faith, because the world can bring us to disappointments or even loss of directions. But we have to learn how to trust in God and realize that these tribulations that we might be going through can deepen our faith. And at times I tend to neglect the important aspects of my spiritual life. And sometimes I instead devote myself to things that aren't necessarily bringing me closer to God. I'd be focusing on like work. Like God, I mean, work is not bringing me closer to God, but I'm constantly like spending most of my time thinking about that. Or it doesn't have to be work, it can be anything.
Yeah.
And we're devoting ourselves to things that aren't bringing us closer to God.
Yeah. And sometimes those things that you focus on so much, they like take you away from God, that you gotta like set your priorities straight in that case. Like, that's what this is. Like, okay, where are your priorities? What are you thinking? You know, like, your priorities have to, like, are they deepening your relationship with God, or are they taking you away from God? You know, that is something that you have to constantly ask yourself throughout, like, your life as a Christian.
Mm-hmm. And in Psalms, I don't know exactly where it is, but it says, taste and see how good the Lord is. And if we want to come back, we have to taste and see that God is enough. We have to taste and see that He is enough for our journey. We have to taste and see that He will be the provider and that He is the peace in our adversary. Let me go back a little. We have to taste and see that He will be the provider and that He is the peace in the midst of our adversity.
There you go. That is important, midst, because when God is in your situation, like we've seen about like what we just read, like when God is in the situation, He will bring like anything back to life, like, and boom, literally, like that's how it worked, like that there be like boom,
the
like
light.
Yeah. So when God is midst is an important word. When God is within you, things will change completely because God is in you.
Yeah, and we need to take refuge in Him. And then I think the rest of the verse said, blessed is the one who takes refuge in me. And in Proverbs 3:6 it says, in all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths right. And I feel like time after time we fail God. Like, we could fall into the same sin over and over again, or do the same thing that's not bringing us closer over and over again. But God will never fail us, you know?
Yeah. He'll always be there, you know, like we mentioned in the beginning, like the story of humanity didn't stop once we failed, you know, no, we kept going and going because of God's abundant grace and love that sustains our life.
And sometimes, even at our lowest, even in our pain, even after our mistakes, he's saying, I'm here. I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to hold your hand all the way through. And everything God does is good, and everything God allows is necessary, which is kind of going back to God's going to give you what you don't. Oh,
no, let me help her. Say it wrong again. God gives you what you need instead of what you want.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have dyslexia a little. So we have to let God direct our steps. In Isaiah 41:19 it says, do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand.
Yeah.
Which is like God saying, like, you're not going anywhere. Like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be here. Like,
I'm going to be here by your side at all times. And I guess in this sense, your comeback is waiting for you, you know. So hold on tight to the purpose that God has called your life to. Hold on to His word and the promises. You know, I love how I've been reading that God's previously established promises through Abraham are ours, you know, and you have to learn how to make those promises that are stated in the Bible yours. They have to become your personal promise. And it is, like those promises that God has stated are ours. So Jesus is waiting for you to call on him. He has your comeback waiting for you. His plans for your life are much greater than anything else that we have in mind. In our comeback, difficulties may still occur, like Melanie read right now, Jesus said that we will encounter hard times and tribulations, but when our comeback, and it seems like it's like, I guess in a way, coincidence, and it's like, oh, like what the heck, when our comebacks begin, it seems like the enemy starts to target us, and in that sense, like how we talked about, not letting your past, because the enemy will use your past against you, in that same sense, don't let the enemy sit at your table, because then he does have the capacity to take away your comeback, because he can put things into your mind like, oh no, Jesus doesn't have anything for you, oh no, he has forgotten you, oh no, you will never be able to move forward, and in that same sense, you can start doubting, but no, know who you rely on, and that is God. Know that he has a set and established comeback for your life. So we need to completely let God take control. We need to stand still in his presence and allow God to lead our lives, and we will live in victory. We will live in the prosperity and goodness of God's grace. So our comeback starts right where you're at, and I think sometimes we think oh no, but I even going new people that are going to church, oh no, but I have to have my life together first before I can go to church. Oh no, but I have to fix this before I can go to church. No, your comeback starts right where you're at. God is gonna work with you right where you're at, no matter your past, no matter your circumstances, no matter anything. God is going to work in you, and God is going to provide a comeback for you, in the Bible. And we will be discussing more situations and circumstances that are mentioned in the Bible of how a person used to be and how now they, who they are now in Christ. And I think we mentioned in the last episode about Paul, who he formerly was and who he is now. And there's just so many more examples, and I think a lot okay, if God can use them, he can for sure use us, and he for sure has a comeback set for our lives, And like I said, in the other episodes, we will be discussing how different comebacks can be seen, and in a way how they can be started, because everyone starts their comeback in a different way.
In a different point.
Yeah, because of our different stories.
Yeah.
So that was this episode, guys. We hope this is a blessing for your life. Yeah. And yeah, just stay tuned for the other episodes, because they will still be devoted about your comeback. So that is the main focus of this new series. I was gonna say season, some sort of episode, some sort of reality TV or something. But no, a new series
every Wednesday.
Every Wednesday, yeah. So thank you so much for watching and listening, and God bless you.